views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting groups. If you'd like to produce a show, call us at 260-421-1250.
Let me be your lighthouse so I can show you the way. Let me be your shining light, I'll keep you from drifting away. I'm the one that makes you try when...
Hello, this is Patty Hunter of Patty's Page. Welcome to my show. We have a special guest named Gregory Mayo. Anyways, today on Zoom, Gregory Mayo, and he's award-winning writer, author, speaker, a whole lot of stuff out there, you know, kiddo.
I'm a busy guy, Patty.
You're a busy guy. Where were you born and raised, Greg?
I was born in Danville, Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
down west of Indianapolis, and was raised in a small town just west of Indianapolis lived there until I was about 20, and then spent most of my 20s traveling all over the country doing stuff.
Pardon? Stuff. Oh,
Stuff.
Do tell me. Okay, I got a minute. Where'd you go to school?
High school?
Hmm.
Plainfield High School.
When you graduated, what was your major? Did you go
Well,
to
it was high
college?
school, so my major was just getting out.
What I meant was, did you go to college or university or?
Yeah, I went to college for a few semesters, but got bored with it and dropped out.
Sometimes it can crunch a lot of information in 6 months. That's supposed to be a year long. So I know how that felt.
Yeah, and at that time in my life, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but after experiencing an abortion,
Hmm.
I had a real tough time staying sort of focused and grounded on anything, right? And so college was a semester of college was just way too long, way too much sitting still for me. And so I would go a semester or two, and then I would stop going, and I would move somewhere to Florida or central Nebraska or wherever. And then maybe in a couple of years I'd go back for a minute, and I never quite finished.
You never
So
settled down, did you? Or have you?
I did. I did. I've been back in Indiana since I was 28, I guess.
And you're
53.
50. I hate to tell you how old I am. I was wondering, after the abortion the wee lady had, how did you feel about and get healed over the years?
Well, so my first abortion experience was when I was 18 years old. Not quite graduated from high school, almost.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't begin abortion healing until almost 20 years later. And a big thing about that, Patty, is nobody back in the 1980s or early 90s was talking about abortion healing, especially for men, right? And so I didn't know that there were other people, other men out there that had the feelings and issues and stuff about it that I did. In fact, when I was 23 or 24 years old, I was seeing a therapist for a while, and it came up during one of our sessions. I brought it up, and he actually said to me, Patty, well, I don't think that's really a thing. Tell me more about your stepdad. And he just blazed right over.
I'll hold him and kick his butt for you, okay?
I'm not sure where he's at now, but I appreciate the offer. So even though something inside me, something in my gut told me that something wasn't wrong, and I mean from the very beginning, I remember sitting on the steps of the abortion clinic with her inside and thinking, this isn't going to end well. I remember when she walked out the door and seeing the look on her face, and something had died in her eyes, and something had changed in me too. So I knew all along that there was something not right about this thing, and yet there was nowhere I could find that would validate that understanding for me.
When did you find closure?
Um, when I was 38 or 39, we were going through some stuff. I'm married now and have
Good.
four sons.
Wow.
And when we were going through some stuff, my pastor recommended a book. And the short version of it is he gave me this book and I read it and I went back to him and I said, Pastor Van, we should do this as a men's group. And he said, that's a great idea. Why don't you do that? So I got roped in and I did. And then one night we were all together and this book, Patty, had nothing to do with abortion. Um, and so we were talking and the Holy Spirit moved me to share my abortion story. And I did.
Mm.
And when I shared it, by the end of that night, like 4 or 5 other guys had come up to me individually and shared their story. And I realized at that moment, hey, I'm on to something. I'm not the only one, right? And so I started looking for first groups I could attend. I didn't find any in Indianapolis. And so then I started looking for books, books on men's abortion recovery. And I read through every one I could find. I went through them with my pastor. And then as part of the recovery process, when we have an abortion loss, one of the things you want to do is to memorialize your child in some way. Okay. For me, with my experience with the 12-step world, part of that was part of my 12 steps too. And so what I did, I went down to the river, a river that's kind of important to me and my family. We spend time at by myself one day. And I sat down on the sand on the beach on the river and I wrote a letter. I lost 2 children, one at 18, one at 22. And I wrote a letter to each one of them. I apologized to them for allowing that to happen. And I asked for their forgiveness. And I wrote these letters. I also wrote one to each one of their mothers. And then I read the letter out loud, said a prayer over it, and sent it down the river. That was how I found my closure. That understand.
Look, when you finally admitted that it happened, did you hide it behind your memory all that time until it came forth when you talked?
Oh no, I knew. I hid it from other people, except my wife. When I started dating my wife, our first or second date, I told her, because I didn't want that to be a secret that came up later. But it wasn't something I talked about broadly at all. And then a funny thing happened, Patty. God put opportunities in front of me to share in front of other groups. And I did. And I'll be honest with you, the first time that night in that men's group, the first few times I shared in front of a group of people, it was horrifying. It was scary to be that vulnerable, right? To share something like that. But every single time I did it, and by now it's been dozens and dozens of times, every single time.
Yeah.
Guys came up to me and shared their story.
Oh, you still feel it in your heart whenever you talk about abortion.
Oh, yeah.
Did you manage to give that baby a name?
Yes. So the first child was named, I've named Abigail. After Abigail Adams, like the coolest woman in U.S. history, right?
Right.
And then the second child, I named Benjamin after Benjamin Franklin, because, Benjamin Franklin. And the novel, Almost Daddy, the Forgotten Story, to further sort of honor those children, the main characters are Benjamin and Abigail.
So here is the book. It is called Almost Daddy. And you are selling it?
Correct.
On Amazon or what else?
It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or my personal website, almostdaddy.com.
So this Almost Daddy book about Ben and Abigail, that's your story, but you turned it into fiction.
Well,
You
like
know,
I tell people, it is a novel, but
mhm,
there are certainly parts of my story sprinkled in. Um, yeah, at one point, Ben ends up in West Central Nebraska in a town called Grand Island.
mhm.
Part of the reason Ben ended up there is because I lived there for a while and I knew the town. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. Ben worked construction several times in the book. I did that for years, so I understood that world. Um, but Ben's story has some elements from my story, but it is truly Ben's story. And part of that is my life in my 20s was like this, you know, it wasn't very
All
linear
over
at
the
all.
place. My late aunt, unfortunately, in Toronto, was an abortionist. But the whole thing, they're all right now in Toronto, Quebec, and all that. They are pro-choice, and they're trying to close up uh, uh, pregnant centers, and stopping churches from helping the unborn.
I heard that. I talked to a lady from a pregnancy center in Alberta last week,
Yeah,
and she was telling me about that law in Canada. Um, I'll tell you what, I talked to a group in New Zealand a couple weeks ago, and um, that country's government is starting to become more and more hostile to
babies.
uh, pro healing and pro life organizations. And the thing is, and I should probably say this right out of the gate, I stay out of the politics of the thing.
But I'm
Um,
trying to reach out to people to say abortion is wrong. It is death to a child,
yep,
and
it absolutely is.
could be death to the mother if they don't do it right.
And when I look at all the organizations that have me come and speak to their staff and their volunteers and their whatever, um, there are a lot of groups doing really good work, sidewalk counselors and that kind of thing, trying
Mhm.
to stop women and young men as they come in for making that decision. And I think it's fantastic that they're out there, and I support their efforts. My work focuses on in the U.S. alone, we've had over 63 million abortions since Roe v. Wade.
Try 64.
Well, over 63 be 64, right?
So not right what they're doing to our
Oh,
baby.
even more so then, right?
Mhm. Planned Parenthood is
So,
liar. They're
and
liars.
we know that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 5 men will have experienced abortion loss by the time they're 45. So, and the reason the number is a little bit higher for women is because about 50% of all abortions in this country are repeat abortions. So, my thing is, if I can provide healing or at least show a pathway to healing for folks that have been impacted by abortion,
Mhm.
they're number one, they're less likely to choose abortion again. And number two, because of that brokenness being healed, they have the opportunity to then go share that message with others, right? What does the Bible say? Freely you give or received, freely give.
Mhm.
You when you receive that grace and forgiveness from God, then you can go out and share that with somebody else. And the more men, and I just speak for men, I don't speak for women. I've been married long enough to know I don't need to speak for women. But and look at you
Abby
just nodding
Johnson
along like
does that. She's a speaker for women. Abby Johnson.
right. And there are a lot of women out there speaking for women on this issue. I know I'm a guy. I think like a guy. I act like a guy. I do guy stuff. Um, After all these years with my wife, there's still some things I do that she just kind of rolls her eyes and like, oh, okay, that's a guy thing. Um,
We know that.
and but what I do, so what I focus my energy on is men. I want to provide men hope, healing, and the pathway to a restored relationship with God.
How do you do
If I
that?
could, huh?
How do you do that?
Well, the first thing has to be awareness.
Mhm.
That's why anywhere I'm invited to go talk, I go talk. Um, because I want men to see that they're not alone,
Mhm.
that other men are impacted by this. And then how do you provide? So that's hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's healing look like? Well, there are a number of men's resources out there, some of them very, very good, that provide small group opportunities or one-on-one mentorship opportunities, books they can work through, workbooks, that kind of thing, to provide healing. And my contention is that if you give a man hope and you show him a pathway to healing, as he experiences healing, he will begin to understand that he can forgive himself,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully understand that God wants to forgive him too. And when he understands and accepts God's forgiveness, then he has the opportunity to have a restored relationship with God.
Were you pro-life when you were a kid?
Yes. In
And
fact,
go ahead.
funny story about that. When I was in high school, I had written a pro-life piece
Oh,
for the school newspaper.
did they put it in?
No.
I don't think so.
And so I've never been for it.
Mm.
Um, when the first one happened, I protested, and I realized looking back now, Patty, that what I needed to do was I needed to bring a stronger voice, and I didn't. I protested. Her mother said, "This is what needs to happen. She's
Mm-hmm.
still in school. You're still in school. Yada yada." What I didn't do was stand firm and say, "You know what? I'm already a dad. She's already a mom. This is not the ideal situation, but this child has already been created. We're going to figure this out." And then the second one, um, I was 22
Mm-hmm.
and I was living out in West Central Nebraska working construction. And I'd only been out there a couple months, and somebody I had dated back east, had gone back to Chicago where they lived. And I got a phone call, and she said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm pregnant." But she said, "Don't worry about it. I'm going to go have an abortion." And I went, "Whoa, whoa, no, you're not. Wait a minute." And she said, "No, I'm young, just out of college, career starting. I'm not ready to be a mom." And I said, "That's
She
okay.
already
That's
is
okay."
a mom.
Right. But I was like, "That's okay. You know what? I'll take the kid. You don't ever have to see it, know it,
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with it. I don't want child support, nothing." She said, "Nope." I said, "Well, let's give it up for adoption. There's plenty of families out there that would love to adopt a child." She said, "I'm not going to be pregnant for 9 months and then all of a sudden show up at work with nothing." And I said, "You know what? I'm going to get my car right now. I'll be there first thing in the morning. Don't do anything till I get there." Keep in mind, I'm in West Central Nebraska. I'm way out there. And she said, "Don't bother. By the time you get here, it'll be done. My appointment's first thing in the morning." And I screamed into the phone, "Patty, please don't kill my baby." And she said real flatly and coldly, "It's not a baby and it's not your decision." And she hung up the phone.
Say, Satan does a lot of damage to people's minds, lies to them. Planned Parenthood, abortionists, they lie just to get money and kill the baby. And I don't agree with that. This has gotten out of hand throughout the world now.
Yeah, we talked about US stats. The last time I looked at the abortion clock, which you can find online, it was 1.6 billion
Mm-mm.
abortions globally
Mm.
since 1980 when the WHO started keeping that data. 1.6 billion. That's a number that's hard for me to process.
That's the whole planet, really.
Yeah.
Like up in Canada, they've been killing since the 60s, 50s or 60s, and they still haven't stopped. I don't know how much we lost.
It's unfathomable fathomable to try to put those numbers together. And what I look at as the women and sometimes the men that choose abortion,
Mhm.
I don't think they do so because they're evil. I think they do so because they're deceived and because they're scared.
Blinded.
Right. And so to me, the only way to truly help the situation is to provide hope and love and opportunity for growth and healing. And I think if we can do those things, and well, look, I mean, the Protestant church has been kind of far behind on this healing thing for a long time. When I was at the abortion clinic when I was 18 years old, there had been a protest the day before,
Mm-hmm.
and there were poster boards around, said baby killer and burn in hell.
Well,
And so that's why studies are showing that most people don't want a religious healing option, men and women. 16% of men or women want a religious healing option, 40% of men. That means the rest of them don't. And that's why, because that's the messages they get from churches. A lot of churches, unfortunately.
Really.
What's that?
It's unfortunate that they only see it as a religious thing.
It absolutely is unfortunate. But then you look at the Catholic Church,
Mm-hmm.
and the Catholic Church has been on the pro healing side of this thing for a long, long time now. And I work alongside about a half a dozen Catholic organizations that are trying to provide healing. I went and did a half a day seminar at a parish down in southern Florida last year for a couple of the priests and then some of the members to talk about what healing looks like, how we get healing, because they've realized, and a lot of people are starting to realize now that the way we restore these people again to relationship with God is that we provide healing opportunities. We have to heal what's broken first, right?
Compassion.
Right.
Not be afraid to talk about it. And to be there when the woman or man breaks down, finally admitting to what had happened. Some people put it way to the back of their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know some people who've had abortions did that. And when you try to gently talk to that person, they either run from you or fight you. But that's the beginning of opening up to that person when they fight you verbally and mentally. That to me is an opening to a relationship with that person. Talk with them gently and at a normal tone, not screeching, whatever. And don't accuse them because they were mixed up. They were pushed into it, or they just didn't know what abortion really was. Even though in the back of their mind, they knew that their child had been aborted, but they didn't want to admit it.
Right.
And also,
right, because it's easier to deny, especially after it's already over. It's easier to deny, well, that wasn't really a kid. So you feel like if you bury it, then maybe I can forget about it.
you go to conferences, you are a keynote speaker. How do you open up to the men when you open up at these conferences and lectures?
Well, every conference I speak at, I share varying degrees of my story.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest part of the reason for that is with a man, if you share openly and honestly and you're vulnerable, then men can sense that vulnerability. They can sense that authenticity, and then that makes it okay for them to share.
Yeah. Know that you're there for them.
What's that?
Know that you're there for them.
Right. And looking and going, hey, that guy, he's been through this too. Well, I got to go talk to him. it's a natural reaction. And so,
Yeah.
like the place I'm speaking in 2 weeks, I guess, they invited me to come and share my testimony. So most of it'll be that. But the place I'm going at the end of February in Seattle, I'm talking about men and abortion healing, but most of my conversation is more actionable items. There's going to be a lot of ministry leaders and clinicians there and that kind of thing. So my story becomes a smaller part of the big thing. But I always share a bit of it because it helps men relate. And it helps men understand, start connecting the dots between what they experienced after the abortion and the abortion itself. And I'll give you an example of that. I spoke at a Celebrate Recovery group down in Southern Indiana, like 6 or 7 years ago, maybe. And I shared my story and I shared about the abortions. And afterwards, people talk to you and whatever. And I was leaving and I walked outside and somebody was standing over by my truck. And it was starting to get dark. And I was like, I don't feel safe. What's going on here? It was some guy that was in his 60s, I'm guessing. And he shook my hand and he said, you know what? I've been sober 22 years. I said, that's fantastic. Good for you. Congratulations. He said, yeah, but that ain't what I want to tell you. He said, I'd never touched a drink or a drug my whole life until my junior year of college. And I said, what happened then? He said, my girlfriend got pregnant and had an abortion. He said, and I drank for the next however many years. He said, until the night, I never connected the dots. I never realized that abortion is what made me drink.
It was a trigger.
That was we stood there and talked for almost an hour. That was a gut-wrenching moment to hear, but it was also a beautiful thing to see God connecting those dots for him.
And healing.
Right.
With the love.
And when you're a man and you share your story openly, that's the kind of impact it can have. It can make another guy feel comfortable to open up. It can also help another guy connect the dots to his own story.
This is going on towards the end of the show. What would you like to share with my audience?
The final thing I want to share, hope, healing, and restored relationship with God. There are millions of men out there, men that men that you go to church with, men that you work with, men that you play ball with on the weekends, whatever it is. There are men in your circle, men in your world who have experienced loss to abortion, and many of them don't have healing.
Yeah.
In our study, 83% said they could have benefited from healing. Many of them don't. So I encourage you, if you've experienced abortion loss, reach out to me, reach out to Patty. We'll connect you with people that can help you heal. And if you've never told anybody, now's the time. Now's the time to walk that path, to restore your relationship with God so he can use you for his perfect purpose that you're created for. Other than that, Patty, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Gregory Mayo. This is Patty Hunter. We'll see you next week. And thank you, Gregory, for being on my show. You are a blessing, and I'm blessed to have you as my guest.
Oh, God bless you, Patty. Thank you for the work you're doing. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you next week.
Godspeed, my love, until we meet again. You're always in my heart and every dream. Don't let this time apart give in to all our fears. God will keep us close from up above. So until we meet again, Godspeed, my love. God is with us always for the rest of our lives.